All right, it is May 2, and we've got a lot on the agenda today to get through. For anyone new to this meeting, this agenda is very informal. Feel free to modify, add things as you see fit, and please ask questions as we go or give feedback. Want this to be as interactive as possible and really appreciate different perspectives. And with that, I think, Candace, you have the first thing on the list, and that's this very outdated beta release plan doc. So any specific comments or questions here? Sorry, I think my audio is broken. I can't hear you very well. Let me switch out. Sorry, can you try speaking again? Can anyone else hear?
I can't hear Candace.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I switch back and forth between Zoom and Google Meet, and they don't get along. So sorry about that.
Very familiar with that dance. Yes.
So what I said was that I've only been here a little while, and I was here when you first presented this doc, so I don't think it was that out of date. But I was interested in an update on some of this date specifics in here. I think there's a March date for something. March 21st at the bottom there. At the very bottom. I mean, we can go through the whole doc if we have time, but
sure. Where did I believe there's a March 21 date, but I don't know.
It's at the very bottom line.
Oh. Yeah, okay. Got it. So yeah, so let's check off the things that have actually happened. This is in progress. Yeah, okay. So I think we should just take that and instead pull out this milestone, which is really tracking a more up-to-date thing that is probably a better representation of what. Now I should make sure that everything we have here is actually an issue in the timeline in the milestone. I think, yeah, this is all done. Let me, at the very least, we need this, a link to the milestone. And I can add it to does that seem fair? I think most things are in the milestone, but maybe I'm missing something. Okay.
I guess the only question I had is whether there's another update on the results of the API review.
Yeah, so that's a good question. We got the initial round of feedback from Tim, and Dan left 1 or 2 comments, but it's a pretty small difference. I really want to follow up with wrong issue with Dan on this one to see if he can provide any additional feedback as well. It's all just in this PR here, and there's not that much feedback yet. Much of what has happened here is, follow-ups in issue, PR, etc. But this is the only bit of API review that's happening right now. Really looking for feedback from Tim and Dan and Cal, but I think Cal's out for a while, so it may just be Tim and Dan. But yeah, just need to, I know they're both very busy, so just need to block a bit more time on their calendars and hope we can get one more round of review.
Okay. So there's probably nothing that I could do to help this along.
Well, if you know, if you happen to work with Dan, anything that you can do to help help him take another look at this would be great.
Oh, is this Dan Winship?
Dan Winship, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he did ask us if we could take a look.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, I want to clarify here that everyone is welcome to review this. This represents the difference between our last release and our current release, and feedback from everyone is appreciated. What we need formally as a requirement to graduate is sign off from SIG network reviewers, which includes Dan and Tim. But anyone can contribute here, either responding to comments, adding their own comments, whatever.
Okay,
Cool.
that makes sense.
Great. Any other comments or questions on the release? Thank you for bringing this up, because that doc had kind of been circulating, and I think it was clearly not as up to date as it could have been.
Let's see. The conformance tests, I was going to work on that, but it doesn't seem like it's anything that's blocking. It's not really blocking the API review or the API or the beta release, is it?
Yeah, I think that's correct. We have not added that as a graduation criteria.
Okay.
The graduation criteria specifically is that we have some conformance tests in place that cover the resources we're trying to graduate to beta. And we have that. The graduation criteria does not require complete coverage of those resources. The more coverage we have, the better it is. Obviously, I think we all want more conformance tests. The more conformance tests we write, the less EUE tests we all have to write individually. So it's a win all the way around. But yeah, I don't consider them blocking for the release.
So I'll switch over to this. I'll say something really silly, and then people will have to come back to it and say, what is she talking about?
That's great. Cool. Okay.
Sort of related to that, do we have any conformance test coverage for TCP route today?
No. I added that to the agenda because it's been a while since I've looked at TCP route and got a feel for who's actually implementing it today.
Okay, sweet.
And so on the agenda, 2 items down. So good question.
That works.
Cool. Maybe Candace, did you want to move on to policy attachment?
We can table this for another time, because I don't know enough about this myself to really ask the questions about it. I was going to ask my local team, why they were so interested in it so that I could report it back here, but I didn't. But people were out today because it's a May Day holiday. For those guys that are working with it. So I can ask this next time we meet.
Yeah,
we could take it off the agenda today.
I mean, I think the good part about our versioning strategy is that there's no reason why we don't have to wait a long time to push policy attachment stuff into beta. Like, we can cut a new version anytime we like that pushes it to beta. So the fact that it's not going into this first round of beta doesn't mean that it's going to be like months and months and months until it goes again. Practically, because of the API review requirement, it'll be a little bit. But like I think the biggest blocker to policy attachment moving further is that there's no implementation examples yet, right? Like, and we don't have a sort of, we've talked a little bit before about having like a sample upstream one that does something common. I think something like what's in the examples of like, I can't remember what the example is, but there's one that's in the examples that most data planes will support. big use case that we sort of were thinking about when we designed policy attachment is timeouts, because that came from the fact that when we do timeouts, when we tried to make upstream config for timeouts, we couldn't, because every proxy does them differently, and there's no way that there's no sort of there's very little commonality in the way that timeouts are handled. And so like we needed to have a sort of implementation specific way to handle timeouts that also had a sort of very specified behavior in how the settings flow up and down the resource hierarchy. So that's where policy attachment came from. But I think that in my mind, the stuff that I would want to see to sort of graduate the idea of policy attachment to beta is to have like a sort of a one that we, the Gateway API, supply that says, hey, if you want to do, here's an example of how policy attachments could work, like, because the whole idea about policy attachment is that the people will make their own CIDs that are the policy CIDs. And here's an example policy CID, and here's how it'll work. And we can give you, we can put it at extended support and show and apply some conformance tests and stuff to be like, this is how this policy attachment will work. And then that's like, that shows that the mechanism works and that we have a standard set of behaviors for the mechanism. And then once that's done, then we can say, okay, now you can go and make your own custom policy attachment stuff. And because we have a good example of how it should work. I think right now the sort of the how it should work is roughly outlined in the docs, but it's very subtle, it's a very subtle idea that is hard to explain. And so the docs don't do a good job of explaining it yet because it's just too hard to explain without concrete examples. And so most of that currently exists probably in Rob's and my head, and we need a little bit more time spent actually bringing that out of our head and making it into an actual spec that people could consume.
So let me see what yep, absolutely. Let me see what I can get. Maybe our team has something like that already if they want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. If your team has implemented some policy attachment stuff, like has implemented a policy, then maybe we can just be like, here's an example, right? Like that'd be great too.
Okay.
But I think that's in my mind, that's the blocker for that stuff moving further.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
No worries.
Thank you for that question and great answer, Nick, by the way. I think this was I kind of just tied this recent PR of mine in because I think it's very relevant. I was working on a PR as part of our release criteria, our milestone of what does it mean to graduate from beta to GA? What does it mean to graduate from alpha to beta? And I realized after I wrote this that it doesn't really, I don't know how we do policy attachment because right now we have policy attachment is what every vendor brings. Every implementation brings their own custom policy and attaches it to our API. How do you graduate? How do you write conformance tests for a pattern that is so, it really does help what Nick's saying if we can bring some kind, use that pattern on a core resource. Like if there is some kind of TLS configuration, I don't know, something like that is shared enough that we could use that pattern. Maybe conformance tests work there. I'm not sure, but that is a very good question and something like I had not thought about in this context yet. So thank you. That's I'd also echo what you said about lots of teams being interested in policy attachment. I've seen the same thing within Google. It's kind of we have lots of different products that want to be configured via Kubernetes. And this is kind of the way that you can attach different config, different concepts. And so it is a very interesting concept to a lot of teams. But like Nick said, we don't have any great implementations publicly available yet that I know of. But the second someone releases something like using this, I'd love to see it. And the more we get, the better. Yeah.
Definitely 100%. I think I just added a thing to the agenda that I just wanted to mention and have in there. We had talked about this briefly before about renaming the reference policy objects so that to not confuse it with the general policy mechanism. I think we have an issue where someone who I don't think is at the meeting has logged an issue sort of saying, hey, I want to build a UI for the Gateway API stuff, and and had some questions about reference policy. And it's, I don't think English is certainly not their first language, so I'm not 100% sure if I've got the right message. But one of the things that was very clear was that I don't think it was clear that the reference policy object is not an implementation of the policy attachment mechanism. And that is because we have called it reference policy and not some other name. And so I think that's one of the reasons that reference policy is not being moved to beta at the moment is that we are not confident that should be the final name. I increasingly think that it should be like, reference grant or reference some other thing that's not policy.
Yeah, that's thanks for calling that out. I agree. I had been very interested in a rename there too. And I think there's some conversation about that in previous meetings. I think there's an issue, like you said, discussing a possible rename, and then it just kind of got dropped. And also, it's just, that's why we're not an alpha yet. Why we're still in alpha with that one. But if anyone's interested, I mean, I'd be supportive.
I think at the moment we're running squarely up against Rob and Nick bandwidth problems. So the more that we can get, the more that we can hand some of these things over to other people, the better. I know my bandwidth has drastically shrunk in the last couple of weeks, and with QCon coming up, I think I'll get some back after QCon. But so I think that right now we are having problems because 2 people does not scale.
Well said. So with that, let's talk about, well, actually, was that all on policy attachment? I know we kind of went in a few different directions there, but did we actually address that question well?
Yeah, I have something to bring back.
Okay.
And maybe maybe we'll be able to provide something to help it along. No promises, but I can definitely check into it.
Cool. Great. Thanks. Okay. So broader question of TCP route. I'm curious among implementers here, who is either currently implementing or has plans to implement a TCP route?
We being console have it implemented today with some restrictions.
Cool. Okay. I know, I'll just make an informal list. I know Istio, it has support for it now.
I think Kong is adding support for it.
Okay. And okay. All right. So that's a pretty good list. Related to that, well, actually, anyone else before I continue? Okay. Related to that, I wanted to call out, something that we had discussed at the last meeting of pulling out GEPS 735, which was the address matching bit. That is one that is significant. It's the address matching for TCP and UDP routes. We had a number of questions that were difficult to answer. And so basically the proposal was, let's pull that back, move the GEP to provisional, and continue with our release just without that concept yet. With that said, since we do have implementations that have either implemented or in the process of implementing TCP route, is that something that you were really looking forward to? Is that, a helpful or key concept?
I haven't gotten the feeling it's a key concept or ask from us right now.
Okay. So out of everyone on the call, like no one has any significant issues with us pulling that, get back to provisional or whatever. I can't remember. Yeah, provisional. And then us retooling that gap and going over the use cases again. post beta and using the experimental mechanism to bring it in.
Okay, so the goal is to bring it back in, right?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, we should be clear. The goal is absolutely to bring something that does a similar function back in. But some of the questions that we had when once we all started thinking about it a bit more, like we thought, well, maybe some of this is better. It actually might be better to put this on the gateway and put it on the listener rather than on the TCP route. Is sort of the, you know, is it in the right place? Is how I would summarize the objections.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, my interest is to make sure that mechanism exists. How it exists, we can definitely have another conversation if we are not confident.
I want to be sure I understand. Is the most interest in source address matching, like a firewall kind of concept, or is there interest for destination address matching as well?
80-20. 80 would be source, 20 would be destination, or probably 90-10.
Okay. Because yeah, there's also some interest in destination address matching that had less questions around it other than how would this be used in an ingress gateway scenario, because like the use case I see for destination address matching is for mesh implementations, right? They want to handle routing for requests that are intended to go to destination foo and send it or apply these filters or whatever it happens to be.
So another, go ahead.
No, I was curious what your use case would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's part that some people also use IP addresses as a way of routing. So imagine you're even in an internal cluster, right, an internal infrastructure, multiple services are exposed on multiple IP addresses, but traffic for all of these are centralized back into, consider these as virtual IP addresses. And all of these traffic for all of this comes to something like an ingress controller, and then it is routed to corresponding backends.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes
And so,
sense.
I mean, it feels like in effect, like what we're kind of talking about here for destination address matching is like you could be matching on, you could have like 20 addresses on a gateway and you only want to bind some routes to some of them is one use case, but there's the other use cases are you want to send all the traffic to the gateway implementation, but then have the gateway implementation pick a route with using the address as a discriminator is really what it comes down to, right? Is that right, Harry?
Yeah, that's about right. Now, there are probably a very small group of people who actually ask for this, and this is mostly like very large enterprise organizations who are trying to move into Kubernetes. So we could question, like, could the solution for source and destination be different? Source is like easy path, and destination could be a bit more complicated. If that helps, us designing the API better.
Okay. Yeah, because I think the questions around source address matching were more of a concern of, is this firewall or is this matching, and how on earth do you merge these rules if there's multiple? I don't think you have those same concerns with destination. I think the concerns with destination is what does this mean for ingress, right? Like how do you, and you can make that specific use case, but like you said, it's kind of for the 10% of customers that are, or users that are enterprise and have specific workloads in mind. Interesting.
Yeah, and we have to be very clear about what the address means, especially because the Kubernetes networking is so fluid. I don't know if that's the right technical term, but yeah.
Fluid is a very polite and diplomatic way of saying that, Carrie.
Okay, didn't mean to say it that way, but sure.
I would have possibly said obtuse or complex. So yeah, thumbs up on that one. Okay. Yeah, so I think just to make sure that we've sort of, since there's people here who are doing the TCP route, like the other objections were like, what TCP route has a whole bunch of like address matching at the moment. What happens if you've got like multiple TCP routes specifying the same address that are all attached to the same gateway in some way? Or what happens if what happens if you have multiple TCP routes specifying different addresses? How does the conflict resolution and the merging and stuff work? And because there's no, because this is like a firewall like functionality and there's no ordering, you can't, this runs into some similar problems to what network policy had originally, right? Like that you can't have, because there's eventually consistent system, unordered, you can't basically have some allows, some denies, because they must be ordered. And so like, yeah, the thing that I liked about the idea of moving that to listener is that you can enforce some ordering and some other stuff like that. That makes this a little easier to make a spec for. So that's just a very quick summary of like why we would consider doing this. So that's on record.
The more I think,
go ahead.
Go, John.
So this is the thing that Harry said is the difference between routing and firewalling. The use cases he has, and I think I might have some similar ones for routing. And as Nick eloquently said about L3 routing in Kubernetes, doesn't. But using the gateway for at least static L3 routing is an interesting concept for end to end. So, but it's. I'm not sure mixing firewalling and routing rules in the same thing is a great idea because of different actions. So I'm waffling a little bit, but it's kind of just off the top of my head.
Yeah, and this is exactly the reasons why we're kind of like, hey, Chief, like we need to step back from this a little bit because it has unintended consequences as we've currently implemented. That's why we want to.
Yeah, that's it, right? If this was just destination address matching, I think the question would be, are the use cases sufficient? But with the source address matching, are we implementing something like a firewall but not calling it a firewall? Are we, so I think this is unspecified enough that we can probably pull both of them out. That is what I propose right now. But I can be convinced if someone wants to leave part of this in, we can do that.
Okay, so I'll put in the minutes here that so please review this. Yeah, I'm +1 on it. I will LGTM that PR. But we're sort of holding it to have some other people who are actually implementing the TCP route have a look. So those of you who are, if you could go to that PR and hit us with the with some LGTMs or and if we need to make it more clear that we're going to come back to this later, that's cool too. Yeah, I think we definitely I think we should do this. Absolutely do this before we move to beta, because once we move to beta, we can't do it anymore. Okay, so yeah, so this is absolutely a beta blocker. So yeah, we need to do that, sort it out. Sorry, hang on.
Cool. Yeah, so this is PR 1139. It looks like I need to push one more update to this, but appreciate any comments, even if it's just LGTM or this is fine with me. Anyone can LGTM this. It just helps to get a variety of perspectives on this. And like Nick said, we can add a note, add an issue to track, adding this back in, getting this gap from provisional back to implemented.
I think the other thing that I will propose here, though, is that we have a lazy consensus period of some amount of time. Should we call it like 3-4 days, something like that? Like, I don't know, Rob.
Yeah, that sounds fair. I'd love to get this in this week. So let's say by Thursday, if we don't hear anything, plan on getting this through. Because this is one of the key things in the milestone. I'd say this is one of the bigger ones, and I'd love to just push it through. Great. Okay, well, speaking of the milestone, let's take a look at where we stand now. We're finally making some progress here. A lot of these are getting through. We have some PRs that are open to fix some of these issues. One of these is a PR. Just I think we're in an okay place. My biggest concerns right now are the status thing. We have lots of conversation around what we could change with status, but we don't have anyone right now working on it that I'm aware of. Is anyone actually working on this or planning to work on it? Okay.
I'd like to, but don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah, I understand. I may be able to find some time, but please, if you're interested in contributing, this is a good way to help out. I think one of these is pretty clear right now, and what we are suggesting should happen, I think.
Yeah, I think Meha asked if she could work on Quad 1, so 1111.
Okay,
I have a meeting with her today to talk about it. So
okay,
we can get a PR pretty quickly on
great,
that one.
great.
Just looking at
And this one is a more generic one, but I think it's, a ready condition. And
I think ready actually needs to wait. It requires too much talking about what ready means. Ready, I don't think we can do ready for B1, beta 1. Those
That's
objects,
fine.
Because of, it's
but
like maybe we have a different type or something like that. But I think a not implemented or not supported condition type for like a generic one that you are allowed to add on to resources, and if so, here's how it works. Is the way to go. Not a one that has a mandated you must do this. Yeah, it's a may, not a must.
Nick, I see this is assigned to you. Are you not able to work on it? Or?
No, thank you. I will call myself. I was working on it a while ago, but I haven't updated it. Thanks.
And to make sure I understood you correctly, you feel like this issue needs to be updated because the ready condition.
So ready. So we did talk in here about saying, hey, we should add a ready condition. And that would mean that once we have something like a ready condition, then it makes some of the conformance tests a lot easier. However, when we talked about this, we sort of found that many implementations can't guarantee that the config has made it to the entire data plane. So like a very strict ready condition is very difficult to do because of eventual consistency. So your controller, when it's, so for the Envoy based ones, your controller can be like, hey, I've made the config available to Envoy, but unless you have a full flow of the ACK messages and stuff like that back to your controller, which very few people do, you can't be like, this is definitely configured, right? And that's what I mean by strict ready condition, is that you can say with great confidence, when ready is true, then the data plane is 100% configured and everything will work. Will, not should, will. We can't mandate like a ready condition because that's what people will think it will mean. Like if you say ready, people mean that like ready right now. I can send as many requests as I want at this whole thing and they are guaranteed to work. And so we talked about having like a different condition type that would have a different name that's like configured or programmed or something like that has similar semantics to ready, but has that sort of slight slipperiness around, it'll be ready soon, real soon now, but not, like use it,
like transitioning or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So the exact, that is a name that you could bike shit on until the cows come home. And so like, just because we also, and so that was the last thing, we agreed that we should say what a ready condition implies and that it is allowed for you to use a ready condition. But if so, it must behave like this. It must be that you can't say you can't use a ready condition unless that means that you are 100% confident that the data plane is completely configured.
Yeah, let me take a look at this issue, and if I could take it on, then I'll sign myself.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
And so with all of these things, as I said, like you can see from the fact that I've commented a million times with like small novels on some of them that I've thought a lot about this. I just don't have the bandwidth to actually do it. So if you do want to pick up any of these, please feel free to hit me up on Slack, or we can do a Zoom or something like that, and I can talk you through the background and stuff like that. It's just that I just don't have the bandwidth to actually sort it out myself. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I understand. Thanks.
Raising my hand here, if there's any way to split up this work and you would like some collaboration, that I could maybe help as well.
Awesome. Great.
So Carlos, I'll keep you posted on what happens with Mehar's one about the other ones, and I'll see if there's any other ones that we can put in there about sort of updating the conditions and the status and stuff like that. Yeah,
and it sounds to me that there has yet to be an agreement about what this spec would look like, right?
Yeah. So it's more sort of we need someone to sort of write up like here's where we're at, like here's what everyone has said, and sort of take all the different bits that everyone has said and sort of bring them together and say, okay, here's what I think we should do. So that we can, and maybe that's a PR then. Yeah, I think that's probably the next step.
So just one tiny thing on this issue 1077, it seems like we can probably split this into two now, because essentially this issue covers two things. It covers an unsupported or not implemented kind of condition and a ready condition. And what we're saying is that ready part of it should be split out to another issue that is not blocking V050 release, but this one should just focus on unsupported, not implemented, whatever we call the condition. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, cool. Who's any volunteers to split this or create a new issue to track the ready condition?
I can do it.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos.
Sure.
Great. Okay, so that's, I think, the main things on the milestone. Most of the rest, I feel like we have a handle on. It's just those status things. And now I think we're at an all right place there. So great. Cool. Okay, I'll move on to
I actually should note, there is one in there that is another documentation one. The path redirects and rewrites. That one's we've implemented the get, but we haven't documented it. So that is a pretty that's a reasonably straightforward small PR for somebody to do. That's go and look at the spec, figure out how it works, and document how it works. That's it.
It is mostly straightforward. There is a gotcha there, and that's this PR where we're kind of switching everything around, or proposing switching everything around on rewrites and redirects, so that I don't have a good diff here, but anyways, the structure is changing just a little bit. That doesn't actually change how you document it. So you could write the documentation and then just change your example ever so slightly if this didn't get in. But I agree with Nick. If you are interested in writing documentation, there's already a gap that describes how rewrites work. So you'd basically be looking at the gap that describes how rewrites and redirects work, and translating that into somewhat more accessible documentation that somebody could understand.
Okay, I will go just now and put some links to those things in that issue so that it's a bit more discoverable, and I'll put a help wanted on them as well.
Great. Perfect.
And I'll
Okay.
unassign you, Rob, since you're probably not going to get to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. All right, let's get into PR and issue triage. I added a few of these that I wanted to be sure to cover in this meeting, but I know there's a lot open right now. First off, I wanted to highlight this discussion around graduation criteria. Thank you. There are some good comments already. Thank you, Damien. Yeah, I would love feedback on this. I appreciate the feedback that I just got, but really need to think through what this means for policy attachment. I'll say just briefly that this first alpha to beta section is what we used in our CAP we had a CAP, upstream CAP, to describe what it meant for this API to graduate to beta. But we never documented that in the Gateway API repo itself. I would agree with the comment that initial is not very clear. It's just some, which is again not great. So getting into a bit more detail there. But if anyone else has thoughts on what we want to consider when we're thinking about graduating from beta to GA or alpha to beta, I think this is very important. It may seem like a trivial small PR now, but I imagine whatever we write here is something we'll be referencing back to over and over again when it comes time to, hey, there's a new resource. Does this meet the criteria? So I'd love to have a sound foundation here, whatever that is. So this is just meant to be a starting point. Feedback is very appreciated. Yeah. Any thoughts, comments, concerns? Cool. Okay, I'll keep on going. There was some concern about gateways in conformance tests. I am curious how the current state of running conformance tests looks like. So if we remember, there was a time when we were initially adding conformance tests where we said, hey, can we pre-provision gateways before we run conformance tests, because we can't do it dynamically. We can't just look at a gateway and then have everything work. We need to do some extra work to get a gateway set up. Are there any implementations still reliant on that?
I cannot answer for Contra at the moment. Sorry.
Okay,
Steve is the one to
that's
ask.
fine.
Are you? I'm wondering if
Steve,
I'm wondering if you're referring to a comment I made like probably a month or two ago about needing to like modify gateways or something before we could run our tests. No.
That maybe it was. Which implementation was this? But we did a fair amount of work. We have those base conformance resources that include primarily gateways. And the idea was, hey, you can set these up beforehand. If every gateway means you're deploying a new control plane, a new controller, basically, and then you can run conformance tests after those are set up. The key thing with this PR is that we're changing that fundamentally, and we're saying a gateway is fair game for an individual test case. So you can like each individual test case may involve spinning up a new gateway. Since this conformance test is coming from Steve, it's probably fine for Contour. The lack of anyone that
I think we called it static gateway provisioning for the conformance test or something like that. So which we did want to allow some people to do to start with because it lets you get started, but I think there's a pretty strong expectation that you can dynamically reconcile gateways and deal with them being created or destroyed as part of the conformance anyway. So it kind of makes sense to me, but we just wanted to make sure that we're not messing with anybody who is assuming that you can do static provisioning at the moment. Contour may well have been the last one to need that. So
I mean, I'll pile on and say I'm actively working on a different conformance test that also dynamically creates a gateway.
Okay,
So
well, that's
I guess that's a vote
that
in
has got to
favor.
be
Maybe you could
Good.
slap an LGTM on this one.
yeah.
I'll take a look.
Okay, well, I'll call that promising. I was just I had a hold on this one just because I wanted to make sure that this was a safe change. It's been fine for us too for indefinitely. Okay, that's fantastic. I'll remove a hold, and I think this one is pretty close to go. Yeah, great. Glad that that's already working and I didn't realize it. All right, one more that I really wanted to highlight here. It's a changelog for O43. We discussed this at the last meeting. There are very minimal changes here. I'll actually just show you the changelog. One, probably the most noticeable one, is if you're relying on an implementation of O40, or O4X, which most people are, you like to be able to deploy the webhook of the same version. And that doesn't work right now because it's stuck on some old Kube webhook search gen image that is out of date. This fixes that. This also fixes some bugs in validation. I think it's just a net positive, a good thing. We should have a practice of bringing these patch releases back. There's no actual API changes here, so I feel like this is pretty straightforward, but again, would appreciate some LGTMs, and so we can get this release kicked off. Yeah. Okay. All right, with that, does anyone have any PRs that they want to highlight that we should cover? I do have one more that I forgot to add, and I'll cover this really briefly, but otherwise, yeah. There is a proposal right now to add a new integration to our implementations and integrations page right now. So our integrations page, as it exists today, includes things like Cert Manager and Flagger, which are just things that interact with our API and can be used with any implementation of the API. This is different than that. This is one that, as I understand it today, is a plugin for traffic. And so here's how you configure HTTP route, gateway, whatever, for traffic specifically. And it can be expanded in the future to support other implementations of Gateway API right now. But as of today, it is limited to a single implementation of the API. The way I thought of integrations, and clearly never documented this, I don't think any of us documented this anywhere, but what I thought of as an integration is something that worked with multiple implementations of the API. That seemed like the bar that we should have, but we don't have that documented anywhere. And I didn't really know how to respond. I responded with some clarifying questions, but I wanted to bring that up in this meeting as a whole to see if others had thoughts on how we should approach this.
Yeah, I think it does seem fair that there's a difference between an integration that works with lots of vendors, lots of implementations. So there's integration that works with lots of implementations and an integration that only works with one implementation. And so, we need to have a way to call that out. It's not just a general integration. And so that I think there's probably two things that we need to do. Number one, we have a thing at the top of this page saying implementation means and integration means, and then we have something that's like we have some other word, plugin, extension, I don't know, something like that. That means an integration that works with one implementation.
is that something that we should include on this page at all?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can see arguments for and against. Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like we should be trying not to, be kingmakers or to be, favoring anybody's implementation. And so, yeah, that kind of feels like a minus.
Yeah.
But like, this is also the place where people are going to go to find out what works with what. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. My personal bias right now is to make the minimum bar to be listed on this page to either have implemented the API or to have integrated with the API in a way that supports more than one implementation. That's
I can plus one that.
This page is going to become difficult to maintain. We already have 16 things on this page, and we're still in alpha. I think Ingress has 20 plus around 20 implementations, but they don't even list integrations. I can imagine integrations would be a very long list. Yeah, so that's my bias. Feel free to join the conversation on this PR. I did not respond with that yet. I wanted to get kind of a sanity check here. But I think I'll proceed with a response like that. Okay. With that, any other pull requests or issues that we should highlight?
I think we still have outstanding conformance test for reference policy, but
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if we're like holding off on that for beta or name changes or whatever.
No, I think this is ready to go. There's like 2 comments unresolved. I pinged Mike on Slack last week just to see the status of it, but I haven't gotten a response, but whenever, like, there's just the tiniest little bit left, and I think this is good to go from my perspective.
Cool. I'll give him a poke in the morning.
Great.
Yeah, I think we're far better to merge this and say, okay, here's conformance test for reference policy, and then if we change the name, we change the name. Change it. Yeah. The conformance tests are versioned anyway. That's the whole point of the bundle version, including the conformance tests, so that we can do exactly that sort of break and change. Yeah, and that would mean that whatever version we bump, we rename the reference policy. That becomes, that would have to be 6.0 probably, because that's version 0.60. That's a breaking enough change, and that then would be the one where we rename reference policy to use the friends naming scheme for a moment.
Yeah. I have a special interest because I've got another PR stacked on top of this one that does the gateway certificate ref conformance test.
Oh, nice. That'll be awesome. Ironically, I think that will mean reference policy will be the first one that covers all the conformance tests. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's I wanted to highlight this. This PR went in last week, and I feel like not everyone may have noticed it, but there's some pretty big changes described here. Most notable is that in 050, there are going to be 2 release channels. You're probably familiar with release channels by now. There's experimental and stable. The big thing is, if you install stable CRDs, stable gateway API, it's just going to include our beta resources, which means it's just going to include gateway class, gateway, and HTTP route.
Which actually means that no reference policy, which means no cross namespace references if you're using stable.
Yeah. Which I really want to get. I think that will encourage and make us all push to get reference policy or reference grant or whatever we call it into beta. But that is a significant change as part of this release. I just want to make sure it's not coming as a surprise, or if that makes people uncomfortable, we have that discussion before we go forward with this, but that is what merged and what we're planning on for next week. Well,
Yeah,
for
and I
the
think-
VO5.
I think the point here is to make it so that the stable channel doesn't have the alpha one, so that we have the opportunity to do renames and stuff like that without breaking the sort of stable contract. Didn't feel right to override and have alpha resources in the stable channel.
Yeah, how much sense does it make if you're using stable channel resources and something breaks from under you? I mean, that seems implicitly confusing. I'm using stable, you know, so yeah. Okay, I think that's all for today then. Any last things?
I think probably the thing that the conformance test for reference policy thing does raise, though, is that we probably need to have a way for the conformance test to say, hey, I'm only do the stable resources, only do the alpha do the alpha resources as well, or something like that. Right now, if you install the 050 stable channel and then we add this, then you try and run conformance, it'll probably fail, right? Because it's going to try and do the conformance on an object that doesn't exist.
I think the way, and I'll need to double check, but I think the way Mike added reference policy, it was an opt-in test, right?
Okay.
It was but that was definitely a key thing to be considering.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that there's definitely some space for people to think about how we handle that. We've talked in the past about ending up with conformance profiles where there's some way that you can say, I only want to be conformant for these resources, and there's some set that's like, no, you got to be conformant for the core ones, which is probably gateway class, gateway reference policy, or something like that. And then there's a way to say, I want to opt in for the HTTP route and the TLS route only, which is what Contour will do, because we're never going to do TCP route and UDP route. And so there needs to be some way for us to do that. So yeah, just if anyone has bandwidth to be thinking about conformance test more, then that's something that we need to figure out how to do as well. And ideally, there's some way that you can do that. And then the last conformance thing we're going to have to do at some point is we have to close the loop and have it so that your implementation can run the conformance tests in some CI or something like that, and then have the same as you do with Kubernetes conformance. The last point is the closing of the loop and the sending of the conformance report, putting a conformance report into a repo somewhere that then you use to have like you get the conformance badge thing. Like, so that is down the road, but like, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that's on people's radars, because at some point we have to have a thing where to finish the conformance process.
Yeah, for sure. Working on KubeCon slides, I noticed that we have several that are already several implementations that are already conformant, and I'd love a way to highlight that somewhere. And what you're saying is kind of the way to do that. So yeah, but we have actually gone overtime today. So thank you everyone for a great discussion. Time has flown by, and we'll talk to everyone next week.
Yep, I think we missed a thing from Travis actually. That maybe sorry in the chat that about that PR that it looks like they only create that QVela only creates gateway and route resources based on something in their tool, which makes it not so traffic specific. So, but that's for you and me to check into later.
Okay, good to know. Yeah. Great, thank you. Thanks for calling out. All right, have a good one.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
See ya.